You are now watching the Amazing Mets Pregame Show with your hosts, Rob and CP.
Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets!
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the Amazing Mets Pregame Show right here on both of our channels. Hopefully, everybody is ready for Mets baseball in the second half. 67 games to go, including tonight. And the season is ending very, very quickly. But we have a ton to talk about. We got trade deadline stuff to talk about. We got healthy pitchers that might be on the horizon very, very quickly. And we got Chris, World Tour 2.0, who is back right now. And we're going to say, what up to Chris? How you doing, buddy?
What's up, Rob? What's up, everyone in the chat? Appreciate you. The World Tour was commenced this past week. Got more vacations lined up. We'll be talking Mets baseball despite it all. Glad to be back. Not going to lie, was on the road for the majority of this past week, so I watched absolutely zero of the Home Run Derby or All-Star Game. Don't think I really missed much, but when we're offline, fill me in on what happened, because honestly, I've been out and about and I haven't been paying attention to anything at all. Like, I watched a couple innings of that Rockies series, was keeping up on my phone, but now I'm back in the full swing of things here, and I'm excited to talk Mets baseball. I got the second half, Rob. We got a lot to talk about. The deadline approaching. Our Mets are only 4 games back of the first wild card in the NL, but this NL wild card race is tight. The Mets can't slip up, and it starts tonight against this Marlins team. And I'm confident. I like the Mets and what they've got going on. I think they ended the first half very strong, and I really hope that they are rejuvenated now after this long rest to go back out there and start kicking some ass, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, if we said before the homestand, what is ideal? 4-2 was ideal, a minimum. They went 5-1, almost 6-0, but they went 5-1, and that is something that a lot of us would have been very happy about going into that homestand. And some people were a little bit upset that they didn't sweep the homestand. And look, the Rockies are a team that hits a ton of home runs. They really can't pitch. And look, it is what it is. They went 5-1. They ended the first half 3 games over 500, and they're in a wild card spot. It's very tight. I think it's gonna get even a little bit less, a less amount of teams that are going to be in it, because over this, at least with the Mets, have no off days. 13 straight games with the Marlins, Yankees, Braves, Minnesota, all that fun stuff in 13 days, 13 games. And that leads right up to the trade deadline. And listen, these next 2 weeks is going to really tell if this Mets team are for real or not. Are they going to be buyers or sellers? And we all know what this team needs. It's not a secret, right? David Stearns, Steve Cohen, the guy next door, the person next to me, everybody in the chat, everybody knows what the New York Mets need. They need bullpen help. But I want to ask you this, Chris, because over the last couple of pregame, postgame, Mets Talk Lives, I was telling Met fans, put your money where your mouth is, right? Because everybody's like, oh, the Mets have to get bullpen help. They have to get bullpen help. But what bullpen help? Do you want to get, C-level relievers for very low-level minor leaguers, and that's going to make you satisfied? No, you're going to want the very good to elite bullpen arms that are available. I don't think it makes any sense going after C-level or below average arms that might be available for the pen. It does not make sense. You might as well do nothing and just hope for the best. So I'm going to ask you, Chris, before we get into tonight's game, since everybody kind of doesn't really want to admit that it's going to take a lot, right? Hunter Harvey of the Nationals got a number 2 prospect back from the Royals to the Nationals. So that's I can put him as like the very good relievers. I don't think he's top tier, but he's just under that. So if that type of reliever is going to get you a number 2 overall prospect in the Royals system who has a good farm, then what is it going to take to get guys like Estevez, guys like Miller, guys like Tanner Scott, for example. So I wanted to ask you, Chris, put your money where your mouth is. We need good bullpen help. What are you willing to give up to get that type of arm or two? Which I don't think you need two elite arms, but one very good to elite and maybe a C-level reliever to piggyback for two relievers that I think most of us need. So, what is your thoughts on that? Since we haven't really heard you when it comes to that type of question.
This was my concern overall coming into the season. If the Mets found themselves in this position, because every single time we went live before the season started, and even during this winning streak, right, that the Mets have had recently, it's like the Mets are trying to kill two birds with one stone. They're trying to preserve the future and be competitive for the future while also being competitive now. And by virtue of the trade of them winning and getting back into this NL wildcard hunt, being the third wildcard team right now, this front office is going to have a lot of very tough decisions that myself, you, the chat, everybody else in between on social media that's not a beat reporter and doesn't have inside knowledge is not really going to know. Unfortunately, the way that I'm thinking right now is that I really don't think the Mets are going to go all out. Doesn't matter whether it's the bullpen. It doesn't matter whether it's a bench bat, like a lot of people want, being a lefty bench bat, whether it's your Michael Conforto or whether it's your Jesse Winker, etc. I don't know if they're going to go all out to get this type of talent in the door in this kind of season. Now, the question of whether they should versus shouldn't is completely different, right? I would love to see the Mets go after it. I would love to see the Mets, like you said, put their money where their mouths are and try to bring in guys to help this team. We have to take a step back and realize and assess this team for really what it is. We know that they went on a hot streak. We know that they have are in a wild card chase right now and are currently a playoff team here in the middle of July. Where do we think this current Mets team's ceiling is right now? Like you said, with Kodai Senga potentially coming back here within the next week and a half, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. And with the way the offense is flowing right now, they're putting up runs on the board. And with the pitching being beyond serviceable to what we actually thought that they could produce to begin the season, all of these variables, the common question is, do we think the Mets are overperforming for what they really are, or are they performing at the pace right now to what they can sustain over the whole of the second half? Unfortunately, this is not something that we can answer right now. And this Mets front office can't even answer that right now. Yeah. That's going to be the hard part, is navigating this deadline while still not having concrete answers. Now, I will say, at some point, the Mets are going to have to get help, because it's a bad look. It's bad optics if they don't get any help at all. And it's a bad look not only to the fans, right, but also to your players who held the players only meeting, who went in there and worked their asses off day in and day out to get back from 11 games under 500. Now, I know I'm continuing to rant here because I'm telling you, at the end of the day, my full circle answer is, how are we supposed to know? I do think that they will get an elite reliever. If I have to give you an answer, they need probably two arms, maybe borderline three, if you want to get Adam Ottavino out the door, if you want to get a Jake Diekman out the door, and maybe some help in between there. I think the common consensus is two relievers and maybe a lefty bench bat to complete the bench in terms of the offensive outlook. But I do think they land one of the better relievers on the market. Hunter Harvey was a name that I've been telling everybody about on this channel. I know the ERA doesn't look pretty this year, but the stuff that he possesses, and being an in-division rival, obviously he was a former national before he went to the Royals. That was a name that I was targeting. But, at this point, the Mets might have to give up one of those top prospects and those premier prospects for a guy that's even better than a Hunter Harvey out there on the market. Now, I haven't heard any sort of rumors of who they're actually targeting right now. I was actually going to go in and do a little scour on X to see if there's been any murmurs. There hasn't been any that I have heard so far, but the Mets are going to have to just put up a prospect, maybe even one that they got last year, right, in return in that deal. And it's going to be a hard sell for a lot of fans. And there's going to be a side of this fan base that's not happy. And that is the problem, right? Like, nobody's going to be happy when it's all said and done, because there's going to be prospect huggers that are going to be like, What are we doing here? Regardless of what the Mets do at this deadline, they're not going to be contenders with the likes of the Dodgers, et cetera, the Phillies, whatever. And then there's going to be fans like you, Rob. I know you're in this boat. We're in it right now. Why are we waiting till next season? Let's make the move and let's see what this team can do, because maybe they have a Cinderella story in them. I don't know where I'm at. I haven't really assessed that. Forgive me. It's my first day back. I really just got into this house and hopped onto the stream, so I wasn't expecting to answer this question. But I will say, if it takes a higher level prospect to get some bullpen help, I would not be hesitant to do it. That's what I'll say. But I also will say with that I do think that David Stearns will be hesitant to do it. I think that this front office, it's going to take a little bit more convincing to them. And that's why I don't think we'll see another move, right? Like we saw Phil Maton, right? But that was Phil Maton. We're not talking about your Estevez's, etc. We will have to see it come down to the wire, because between now and between that deadline day, it's still an evaluation period. Did that previous run convince the front office? It could have convinced some fans like you and me, but we don't know what's going on in front office's mind. So it's going to be a very hard tell, Rob. I really don't know, but you're right. Seeing what the Royals had to give up for Hunter Harvey is a very big indication for what's to come if the Mets want to improve this roster.
Yeah, and comparing the last two seasons, 2022 and 2023, there's always either a bat, a starting pitcher, or a bullpen list of guys that have that's a premium that a lot of teams need, right? 2022, it was the year of the bats. Premium bats were on the market, and those were the highest cost. Last year, obviously, we've seen it with Verlander and Scherzer, and amongst others, starting pitching was a premium, and the Mets benefited from that. This year, the premium is if you have bullpen arms, either good, very good to elite. And this is the cost you're going to have to pay to get with the big dogs. And look, I hate prospect huggers. I've said it since day one of my channel. It's not about not worrying about the future that I have the argument with, because that's an easy argument to make. But the same prospect huggers are the same ones having negative takes when they lose. So what is it? Do you want to continue to hold on to prospects and worry about 2030, or do you want to win now? Because everybody can say, oh, we're not as good as the Dodgers, we're not as good as this team or that team. It doesn't matter. We've watched baseball enough throughout our entire lives, specifically over the last couple of seasons. The best team doesn't always win anymore. They've been getting picked off year after year after year. So, yes, the Mets can be the Cinderella story. Why can't they be the Phillies of 2 years ago or the Diamondbacks of last year? They weren't that much worse or better or even on the same plane as those two teams were going into the playoffs. Third wildcard teams. That's what they were. Don't look at the record because it's irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, you make the playoffs, you can beat anybody. Anybody. It does not matter. The rosters be damned. Because nobody can tell me that everybody – find me somebody who bet the Arizona Diamondbacks to go all the way starting the playoffs. If there was one person, somebody that wanted to waste money, that was probably rich and got lucky, right? Because it's a big crapshoot now. And my issue when it comes to fans or organizations or front offices is that you can't preach this is a playoff team. David Stearns and Steve Cohen said it multiple times, specifically in May when they were 11 games under 500. They said that to the public, to the media. You can't say that and then say this team needs to prove it. They've proven it over these last 6-7 weeks, got back to 500, now are over 500 in a wild card spot. Now, there's 13 games to go until the trade deadline, so a lot can happen. The Mets can fall apart in these last 2 weeks. But if they don't, because if they hover around 500, 3 games over 500, it's probably going to still keep you in the wild card, either one of them or right there. So if your mind's not made up now, if you're David Stearns, then sell. To be honest, like, you know, I don't like the fact that teams punt seasons when there's a shot of making the playoffs. Like, I'm not saying like, a team like Cincinnati, who was around 3.5 games out of a wild card spot. That's a tough call. But when you're in a wild card spot, say if the Mets on the 28th of July, even though who knows what would be available at that point, some might be off the board already. But say the 25th of July, which is 6 days away, the Mets are 3 or 4 games over 500. They're a game out of a wild card. Maybe a couple teams got a little hot. You're going to tell me that you're just going to say, all right, you know what? I don't want to give any of my top 10 prospects, so I'm going to go for them C-level guys. What are you gaining there? Hitting lightning in a bottle? Because that's what you're trying to do. And that's not going to put confidence in the team, who says, wow, the front office don't really believe in us, and the fan base, who is going to kill David Stearns, the same people who wanted the prospect hug the whole time. So you got your wish, but now you're disappointed because now you don't have a summer to look forward to. I guess that's my point.
I have so we're talking about top prospects here. Obviously, right now, everybody knows what the hot commodity is in the Mets farm system versus really who isn't, based off of what we've seen so far this year. A lot of high upside guys that maybe coming into the season we thought, hey, they could be expendable, and vice versa. Guys that we thought were superstars of the future are not looking too great. This stuff comes and goes, and this changes like the wind, right? With the evaluation of these prospects that, quite frankly, we don't know about. And even the guys that are grading these prospects, like, they can be quote unquote experts and grade them all they want, but at the end of the day, nobody really knows until they get up to the major league level. What I will say though is to work around the prospects that you may or may not have to give in order to get maybe one of your top relievers that you want to join this Mets team to help out a Daniel Nunez and help out an Edwin Diaz in the back end of the bullpen, is using a guy like Starling Marte, using a guy like Jeff McNeil, and doing the same thing you did last season to pay off their salaries and include them in that deal to make take the load off of what you would have to give up with the prospects. Now, I get it. Jeff McNeil's been crap. He's been bad. And even if you pay off his salary, people are going to ask you, what are you really going to want for Jeff McNeil? What are you going to get for Jeff McNeil? Quite simple. I will say, even though as bad as Jeff McNeil has been, I do think if you pay off the rest of his salary, right, which is not out of the realm of possibility at all for the New York Mets with Steve Cohen's money involved, and they've showed that over the last couple of years. And I'm not saying you have to pay 100%. I'm saying maybe 60%, 70%. I haven't done the numbers and I haven't crunched the numbers in terms of what that would actually come out to be. And I know he's got years left on his deal, et cetera, et cetera. And this is maybe more geared towards a Starling Marte and not a Jeff McNeil. I just threw Jeff McNeil's name in there, but you know what I mean. Bringing those guys at the center of the deal, because Starling Marte, he can help out a true contender any day of the week as long as he's healthy, and he doesn't have to be a starter on a true contending team. And this is exactly why, Rob, before I went on vacation and a couple weeks before that, we talked about having to give up a guy like Jose Quintana, a guy like Sean Manaea, and giving up one of your rotation pieces, which you have a plethora of, to try to mitigate that. So that is really the only way that I foresee the New York Mets being able to talk teams down from some of these top prospects. And I'm not saying the Mets are going to give up their number 2, number 3, and number 5 prospects, right, for relievers. These are relievers at the end of the day, especially with what somebody said in the chat here. The difference between a rental versus someone that's under control long-term also matters as well. But you know what I'm talking about. Your back end of your top 10 prospects, you're talking about your 11, 12, 13 ranked prospects that are still very valuable because the Mets prospect and farm system pool is so deep. You got to realize the guys, there's a lot of moving pieces on this roster even still that are expendable. And there's some names that people probably don't think are expendable that David Stearns is trying to find the workaround to maybe include in some packages if I had to just guess. So I wouldn't take that off of the realm of possibility at all either.
Yeah, you see, the thing was that is like, who's going to need the start in pitching? Who's going to need Jose Quintana? A contending team, right? Is a contending team gonna give up a good bullpen arm because they need starting pitching. I don't see that. Like I know people are talking about that, but like I don't like say for example, I don't know, pick a team. Pick a team that a reliever that you might like that's in contention. I don't know. The Cardinals, whatever name that they have, a good reliever, right? And you say, all right, you need starting pitching, we'll give you Jose Quintana. But we want one of your better relievers coming back. Isn't that a wash? Like you're hurting your rotation. As much as everybody believes that, oh, let's just throw Jose Butto in the rotation and bring this guy that we just got to fill that bullpen role of Jose Butto. We just assume that Jose Butto is going to be fine, and then that bullpen arm is going to be better than Butto. Like that's the problem that I think you're going to fall into, and that's why I don't think that works. I think that's half-ass in a deadline. I really, if they do that, then you know what? Close up shop because it's not going to work. Because I think you're totally throwing the rotation into shambles, the same rotation that has saved the ass of this team the entire season. And you're saying that, and not just you, but just in general, like media, sports reporters mostly are saying it as well. I think that's more media driven than leaks coming out from the Mets front office, which we know there's no leaks that are coming out. So I think that's media driven, where I don't think they believe that Stearns will trade prospects. But aren't we all guessing, including reporters? Because we don't know what Stearns believes. We don't know if he likes any of these top prospects. He could talk about the future all he wants. He could talk about the prospects all he wants, but that doesn't mean he likes them. And what I've noticed, specifically with this draft, is that he will hold on to pitching prospects because he drafted a hell of a lot of them in this last draft. I think 12 pitchers out of the 20 draft picks that the Mets had. I think he chose that many pitchers, and mostly all college pitchers. So what does that tell you? That tells you two things. He prioritizes pitching prospects. I think position player prospects are on the table. And yes, that is Jet Williams. Yes, that might be Drew Gilbert or Ryan Clifford or any other top position prospect the Mets have, right? If you can get Carlos Estevez from the Angels, but it's going to take Jet Williams, I'll do that in a heartbeat. Because here's the problem. Where's Jet Williams playing? Where's he playing, right? Vientos put a whole switch in this infield dynamic here. If Vientos is going to be a third baseman of the future, you got Lindor. Acuna will be a second baseman at some point, right? It's not like Jet Williams is going to play first base. And even if you don't keep Pete Alonso, Ryan Clifford's going to be a first baseman. So where is he playing? You could say the outfield, but that's a work in progress. He hasn't played enough outfield at all. I know he's been hurt, but he hasn't really played much outfield at all. He's been playing short, second, and third, mostly in the minors. So throwing him to the outfield is like a Ronnie Mauricio experiment that's going to fail. So I just don't see that. And then what are you going to do with Drew Gilbert? You know, so in my opinion, if it's a guy, look, I'm not saying trade Jet Williams for a B-level prospect. I'm talking about the top-level prospect, pitchers, bullpen pitchers. If you can get one of those guys and it takes your top prospect, especially an infield prospect, where also you have Ronnie Mauricio as well, you can't throw all these guys in the outfield and hope it works, because there's a pretty good chance it won't. So we have to remember the dynamic of our infield now. With Vientos embracing this starting role and looking like a third baseman and obviously hitting, there's really only one spot available in the infield if Pete Alonso's not around. That's first base. Because you also got Mauricio and you also got Acuna. Not many spots to go around for this infield long term. So I think if you dangle Jet Williams around, you can get probably one of the better relievers on the market. And that might piss a lot of people off, but why not? And you know what? I believe Estevez, I think, has 2 years of control, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like you're only getting a rental.
I don't think he does, Rob. I just looked
You
at it.
sure?
Estevez is he's a UFA in 2025.
Oh, Jesus, damn it. Well, you know what? I still do it. Fuck it. I
That
still
would
do
have
it.
made more sense. I was like, I was
Yeah,
picking up what you were putting down because I was like, I might as well look this up. But yeah,
good.
he's a
Thank you for looking it up.
unrestricted free agent. Yeah.
Todd, Estevez will not cost a top 5 prospect. Yes, he will. Yes, he will. Hunter Harvey got a number 2 overall prospect. And yet, yes, he does have a little bit more control. If I'm not mistaken, I think he has 2 years of control, right? Hunter Harvey, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. It might be even more. But I don't think Harvey's a free agent after this year. I think he has 1 more year of control. But Estevez is one of the better closers in baseball. Just because nobody cares about him because he's with the Angels and on a losing team doesn't mean he's not very good. Like Hunter Harvey is probably not better than Estevez. And Hunter Harvey got a number 2 overall prospect. So it's going to cost you. But again, it goes back to the same thing. What are you willing to give up? And I'm not just asking Chris. Chris already answered it, but got people in the chat, right? Everybody knows we need bullpen help. That's what we've been bitching about for months during this stretch. So I asked everybody in the chat, listen up. You want bullpen help. I'm not talking about decent bullpen help, like C-level bullpen arms. I'm talking about the very good to elite. If you want those guys, or at least one of them, you're going to have to pay the price. And that's premiums. You know, Tanner Scott, he's probably going to get a top 10 prospect, most likely. Estevez could get a top 5. I'm thinking he could get a top 5. We know Mason Miller is going to really cost you if he's going to be available with 5 years of control. So it's what you're willing to give up and what are you willing to pay, right? We don't know what Stearns is going to do. This is a guessing game for all of us. But Met fans seem like they're shying away when it comes down to put your money where your mouth is. And I think that's the biggest issue that Met fans are having right now. I think they're in between because most Met fans never expected this type of season and thought it was a transition year. So it's an easy peasy type of season for fans. Oh, we're going to be sellers anyway, so who cares? Let's worry about the future. Let's worry about 2025. Chris, how many shows have we done in the offseason when everybody's like, oh, it's a transition year? I mean, transition was the word of the offseason. 2025, that's what we heard. And that's what we've seen on the chat. So now I don't know how fans don't know how to react or they don't know what to do because they didn't expect to be in this spot anymore. So guess what? You want to win or you want to give your team the best chance to win? Because Nimmo and Alonso have been very vocal about needing help and getting reinforcements. And Pete Alonso said it during his interview during the All-Star game or during the All-Star Home Run Derby when he was speaking. So players on the Mets are telling Stearns, get us some help. So if you're Stearns, you have to do something. And I'm not talking about, bullshit relievers. I'm talking about good relievers that is really going to help this team over this next 67 games of the season. So it's a tough call, man. I don't want to be Stearns right now. I tell you that much.
I agree with you. I mean, I really do think at the end of the day, taking my bias aside with who I want versus who I think the Mets will get, I really do agree with Meech. And I know that you're going to hate this, Rob, but I don't think the Mets are going to go after the big guys in this market. And I think they're going to just play it out. I really do think that. And like you said, it has to take a drastic push here. Maybe the Mets get 5-6 games over 500, go on a little win streak here as the second half begins. But at the end of the day, like everybody's saying in the chat, it's a measured cost, and I completely agree with them. And I was very, very, I guess, hesitant to believe that this deadline would bring us fireworks. Even with the reports that we heard recently saying that Steve Cohen is willing to open up his checkbook for David Stearns to get whoever he wants, et cetera, something to that effect, because I definitely saw that article floating around there. Very hesitant to buy into that. I will say, though, if David Stearns does want to bolster this team, he has all the means necessary to do so with the monetary value, the prospect value, etc. But this is going to tell us a lot on what the future plan is for the Mets beyond just this season, how aggressive they're willing to go at the deadline. Couple other names. I like what I saw in the chat. I don't know how the business side of things are between the Texas Rangers and the New York Mets following last deadline, but you can call the Rangers back up and say, hey, listen, what are you willing to sort of offer us up for David Robertson back? He's got a 2.88 ERA. And if you really want to hit a home run, and you want to follow the Kansas City Royals path because it seems like they're going for it with Hunter Harvey. And yes, you are right, Rob. Hunter Harvey is arbitration eligible next year, so he has that year of control. And guess who also fits that mold and has even better statistics that is also a current national? Kyle Finnegan would be an awesome get for this bullpen as well in the back end. So I don't know. If you're going to get Kyle Finnegan, obviously it's going to take a lot more in terms of the actual return than a David Robertson is, who's higher up there in age, who's on a team that's 7.5 games back of a wild card, etc. But you just never know what the opposing trade partner is thinking, not only in terms of their relationship with the Mets, but also how they view the rest of their season. Listen, the Texas Rangers, 7.5 games back, defending World Series champions. They could be like, screw off. We're still making a push for this. We get a couple guys back healthy and we're making a run. We really can't tell up here. And like you said, there's so many different perspectives in terms of what the Mets should do as a fan to fan, rather than what we all, I guess, know this team is going to do, because nobody at the end of the day really knows anything. Some people might be happy and take it as a win that we get a tier B, tier C guy. But you as a fan, you're not going to be happy with that. So I don't really know. All I know is that the Mets bullpen is in really rough shape, and any help is good help in my eyes. But I agree with you. I will say, if a situation arises, and I would probably more so be willing to go after those guys that have another year of arbitration left, another year of control, because at that point, I know as a fan, at least we have that to hold on to if we see a prospect go and he ends up killing it whenever he gets called up over there. Listen, I hate to be a prospect hugger, and I'm really not one at the end of the day. I just don't know. Like, I don't know what my measured level of confidence is for this particular Mets team. I've said it before. What was my biggest concern in the second half? It wasn't even the bullpen. It was the starting rotation in terms of how they were going to actually hold up, because I think that they've been overachieving expectations. If they come down to earth, right, based off of what they were on paper coming into the season, which wasn't bad, but it definitely wasn't a contending caliber rotation, then I don't know. You're looking at an investment, and maybe the Mets fall flat on their faces in mid-August, and we're all sitting here saying, wow, that was a mistake to do that just 2 weeks ago. There's so many different scenarios that can play out that we simply just won't know. But I do agree with everybody in the chat as well. We will get a better picture here in the next week. Let's say the Mets start off let's say the Mets start off with a series loss to the Marlins. Are we singing the same tune that we're singing right now in terms of going all in? And that's only, 4 days out, 3 days out? So this is still a very big case-by-case basis. But the fact that we're having this conversation tells me one thing. It tells me one thing. Maybe not for you and Rob particular, because it seems like you are very strong in your sort of admiration to go out there and get those big fish in the pond type guys this deadline. But with the stuff that I'm seeing in the chat, with the way that I'm even talking right now, and the fact that this front office probably is in the same situation, I don't think anybody truly knows the identity of this team right now. I don't think that we can definitively say what the identity of this team right now. And I don't think that this team has that high ceiling for the Mets front office to go out there and be big buyers. That is my personal opinion, and anybody can disagree. I know you will disagree, Rob, but that's just me personally speaking. I know this team can squeak into the playoffs, but anything beyond that, investing too much into this season could be a mistake in hindsight. But I agree with your level and perspective of thinking as well. Why are we thinking about hindsight when we haven't even gotten there yet and we're in the now? So all I'm saying is that I don't know the true identity of this Mets team. Regardless of what happened in the Grimace era, the OMG era, after the players meeting, we don't know what the
Yeah.
identity of this team is. And I'm sorry to hijack. I apologize for hijacking all of this Mets baseball talk here and this pregame stuff with the deadline, because obviously we have a game tonight that we're going to be talking about here in just a second as well. But
Yeah.
it's very interesting perspective, and this will change over the course of the next week, whether it's for the better or whether it's for the worse. We don't know, but it will change, because I don't think that we can definitively say this team is anything right now, whether they are contending caliber or not. Like that remains to be seen. And it sucks because it's July, mid-July. We should know what the identity of this team is. And I just don't think we can say that.
Well, yeah. I tend to. I wouldn't say I disagree, but isn't every team except for the Atlanta Braves in this wild card race kind of in between? So that should give you more of a reason as a front office, especially teams that are one game and a half out of a wild card spot, which is like 3 other teams behind the Mets. I mean, because it is so hit or miss with almost all these teams, I'm going to include the Braves because they really came back to earth. I mean, I think that it's not even just about the Mets. I think it's just the landscape of the National League wildcard race, that one move could determine you running away with one of the wild card positions, in my opinion. I'm not saying that it will, but it's a possibility. The way these teams have been playing, including the Mets, by the way, as hot as they were, they still hovering around wherever the last 3 or 4 or 5 teams are. So I think it's the landscape of the National League where you have to look like, okay, we get a wild card spot. We're going to knock off one of these teams, say if we do make the playoffs. Like, somebody's going to get knocked off. Like, there's a pretty good chance that one of the division winners that play a wild card team, or that's going to play a wild card team, is getting knocked off. It just seems like that every year. Like, the best teams usually don't make the NLCS. At least one of them might. So I think it's more of the landscape than believing in this team full bore, in my opinion. That's what I think it is. Because, like, say if they do go 500 in these next 10 games, take it to July 28th, 29th, like, deals are already going to be happening prior to that. Probably next week we're going to start seeing deals. So how long can you actually wait? You can't wait. And if you're Stearns, you can't wait until July 29th, wait for this 10-game stretch and be like, oh, wow, we're 6 games over 500. I guess I got to do something now. Oh, wait, everybody's gone. That's actually good. And then what do you do? So, and that's the thing. I think he has to make up his mind over this next probably 6 game, this mini road trip, the 6 games with the Marlins and the Yankees. I think those 6 games, he has to make a decision, because you can't have bullpen arms falling by the wayside and ending up on teams that might be in this race with you. What if the Cardinals get some help that took a reliever away from you, or the Pirates, or the Padres, or whoever else? So you also have to look at your competition. You don't want the other teams that you're chasing or that you're fighting for a playoff spot getting better when you're standing still because you're not, quote unquote, sure. Not saying that you're wrong. Stearns might be doing that. But, obviously this is all speculation. We're trying to figure out what he's thinking. So I think it's more of the landscape of the National League. And you can't wait until July 29th when everybody's good off the board and then says, oh, okay, let me get this guy. He has a 4.5 ERA. But, hey, you never know. Lightning in a bottle. We need an arm. So I think that's probably not what he's thinking, but who the hell knows? So I think it's the landscape.
For me, it's just like what the barometer is, right? Are we trying to stay on par with the Cardinals and the Padres of the world and the Diamondbacks of the world? Are we trying to sort of make our team and put them in a position to compete with the Phillies and the Dodgers? For me, you can have what? What was that?
Can't they? Why can't they?
I don't know if that's possible. I'm honestly in the belief that, obviously, outside of a Cinderella run, obviously we've seen with the Diamondbacks and the Phillies the last 2 years. Obviously, the Mets can have a Cinderella run like that just as easily as they did in 2015 as well. That's not what I'm discrediting at all. But I'm saying is, if you're a front office GM or president of baseball operations that got brought in here in year 1, is that what you are going to do, and or is that what you're going to bank on? Because quite simply, I have to toss all my bias aside. The Mets can go out there and have the best deadline of any team in the MLB. I still don't think they are as good as a Los Angeles Dodgers team. I simply don't. So
I think the
that's
Dodgers
what
are very flawed, by the way. I
I'm
don't
sure
think
they are flawed. I'm
I
sure
don't
they
think
are
they're
flawed.
as good as everybody says they are, to be quite
I'm
honest.
sure
I
they
think
are
they're playing in
flawed.
a bad NL West. And
But
NL
I
West,
think the Mets have like Rob, we were just talking months ago about how we don't believe in this core to win anything.
no, I
So we
agree.
can't. So you know what I mean? Like, are we gonna like believe that now all of a sudden because they're 49 and 46?
Well,
Like, I don't like.
no, but I think we're talking about the core long term. I don't think we're talking about now today. You know what I'm saying? Like it could just. What if it's just this is like a 1 year wonder for this core, and Nimmo's best season is going to be this year. Lindor's having an excellent season, might be one of his better as a Met, right? What if you just hit these guys, just do the as good as possible, even better, just this year? Like we talked about the core. We weren't really talking about the core of short term. I think we were talking about more long term. Unless I'm mistaken,
But
because
that's what I'm saying though, is that you have to bank on everyone having their best year, and that's a lot of like luck and a lot of, I guess, just like hope for
but that's
a front
baseball.
office to.
That's this baseball in this day and age. To be quite
I
honest,
get it. I get it. I don't know, man. It's just a lot
I
for
don't think
me
you
to
can give. I don't
think
think
that
you
they're
can
gonna
give up.
do that.
Yeah, you're right. That's true. That's true. But I don't think you can give up on seasons anymore. Like I feel like too many teams do, and you continuing to see, like, we don't even have to go back to the Philly. We don't have to go back this early from the Phillies and the Diamondbacks. You can go back to 2019 with the Nationals, who were a 500 ball club right by the trade deadline. It's not like they got a great deadline. They had an okay deadline, but they just got hot at the right time, and they won a division, but they weren't one of the best teams in baseball by far, and they just got hot. And I feel like the front office job is to get the team to the playoffs. Once you get to the playoffs, it's on the roster. Like I feel like you can't, step back with your hands folded and not help this team. Now, regardless if you agree that it's going to be B level or C level, if I think that he's going to go A or B level, that is yet to be determined. But if you're going to get the two arms that we clearly need in the bullpen, regardless of who they are, at least show me a little bit of effort that you're trying to fix this bullpen. Because if I'm Pete Alonso, or if I'm free agents and I see a front office that didn't believe in this team, regardless of what you might think of these players or what I think or you think of these players and whatever the core we might believe about the core, the fact of the matter is they've proven something that I thought they never could have done. Quite honest with you. I thought they were dead in the water, and I think a lot of people believed it as well. And maybe even David Stearns believed it. But I think putting our thoughts aside, our owner and president of baseball ops said they believe this is a playoff team. Unless this is a bunch of bullshit that they're throwing at us, I don't think they're stupid enough to say that publicly, both of them, and not believe that. So if you believe that it's a playoff roster in May when they were having their worst month of the season, or at that moment when they said that, then you can't have the opposite viewpoint when they're better than when they were in May. So,
I
just
don't. I will say for the record, I don't, because I still think if the Mets went out there and got one or two C tier relievers just to help this bullpen, they would still be able to get into the playoffs. So that is not changing for me. Like, I
okay.
still
Well,
believe.
then that argument is kind of thrown out the window then for both of us, because then it's right. Then we're both on the same page then, because like
Yes.
I think I agree. I think doing something of that sort, two arms, that's the front office doing their job to get them into the playoffs. Like the front office can't do nothing once they get into the playoffs. It's all about the players and if they step up. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not blaming Stearns for this season if the Mets make the playoffs and get knocked out in the wild card round. I'm not blaming Stearns. I'm blaming the players. So because I think Stearns, if you make the playoffs, your president of baseball ops did his job for that year, in my opinion. Like, he put a good enough roster together to make a playoffs, regardless of the record. Because I think the third wildcard team is going to be 2 or 3 games over 500 at best. So it's just a matter of, what roster. And I truly believe this. There's going to be a wildcard team in the NLCS. I'm telling you this right now. Who is it? I don't know. Because the Braves are a dangerous team. Even as a wildcard, they're a dangerous team. The Cardinals have shocked a lot of people. People thought the Cardinals weren't going to be that good. And the same thing with the Mets. So, I think there's going to be an NL wildcard team in the NLCS. They're going to pick off a really good team. At least one, maybe two. So, and it's not even that they're just going to be red hot or they're going on a run. I just think it's baseball. It's 2024 baseball nowadays. It's such a crapshoot because nobody seems to play enough at the moment, especially the best teams, right? I think the Phillies are going to be damn hard because there's not a lot of flaws on that team. And that's come from me who can't stand the Phillies, like, at all. And, but teams like the Dodgers who are extremely top heavy, if you get you saw it with the Mets when they took a series in LA. Once you get past the first 4 batters, it's a bad lineup. Their rotation, who they were supposed to get a lot of reinforcements back healthy, well, they got a couple of bad blows with their rotation. So they're not as good as a lot of people are projecting or foreseeing them through 90-plus games and now or into the future. Now, that doesn't mean the Dodgers can't go on a run. Of course they can. But I think when it comes to the playoffs, I think it's going to come down to who pitches better, regardless of the names, and who gets the big hits. It's just playoff baseball. If you know your team's going to lose, why would you watch a playoff game, right? Right? Did everybody, I don't know. It just feels like going into the 2022 playoffs, did anybody believe that the Phillies were going to win the World Series or get into the World Series? No. Like, I just feel like I hope Stearns does what it takes to get some arms in the bullpen, which even if it's A, B, or C tier type of relievers, do something. Because, yeah, some might complain, including myself, that he should have done more, but he did something. And he put most of this roster together. He basically put this whole rotation together, put a couple of arms in his bullpen, interchanging them throughout the season to have a good enough roster to make the playoffs. And then we'll see what happens with the players of crapshoot.
Yeah, and I think that the overall, just to sum this up before we actually talk about tonight's game, I apologize to everybody. I think to sum this up, I think we're both in agreement that the Mets need to be buyers. And I think the Mets will be buyers, right? I'm not going to ever dispute that fact. They are in a position to be buyers. I guess, over the last 30 minutes, I've just been talking about what kind of buyers they're going to be. I'm not convinced they'll go all out. I think 2 guys, whether it's, right, as we all would hope, would be the top tier guys that's on the market, whoever that may be. But I don't think that they're going to go all out. So I agree with what Stevie Mac's saying right here. Shout out to Stevie Mac as well. They don't need to go crazy, get 2 decent guys for the pen, and take a chance on someone like Brian De La Cruz or some random outfielder on a crap team. I'm not saying that the Giants are a crap team, but we've been talking about Conforto. We've been talking about Mr. Jesse Winker, like an outfielder for the bench and right into the second half. Because guess what? Like we just said, Rob, to sum it all up, this team as constructed right now can be a playoff team as currently constructed. You add what we just said right there. It doesn't have to be the top guys, although we would love for it to be. You don't need to sell off the farm for a wild card spot. You can. Don't get me wrong. You can. Stearns can. I don't think he will, though. You get some help in areas that this team needs help in. Maybe David Stearns finds a value trade and they have a hell of a second half, right? You are going to be that much better than you already were at 49 and 46. You're going to get into the playoffs. And then, like you said, as long as you're in the playoffs, anything can happen, right? The Mets right now, they can make a run. They can be in the playoffs and they can also make a run. But what we're saying is that the Mets are going to be buyers for sure. I think I'm going to confidently say for myself that I don't think they're going to go crazy this deadline, but they don't have to. As Stevie Mac just said, that's where I'm kind of like, all right, you're going to convince me that David Stearns is going to buy into this whole let's sell off everybody for making this team as good as the Dodgers on paper, quote unquote. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think that we've already hashed this out, Rob, that we just want to see them improve the bullpen and add a couple of guys so they can make maybe a Diekman and Adam Ottavino expendable. I think that's going to happen. We need to be patient because, like you said, I don't think the Mets are going to be one of the first teams to make a move here in the second half. I think they're going to try to wait this market out. Maybe the top guys go to maybe a team like the Cardinals, maybe a team like the Dodgers, or whoever else is contending. And it's going to suck to see those teams get better with the Estevezes of the world, with your Finnegans of the world, etc. I just don't know if the Mets are going to be in the market for those type of guys. I wouldn't rule out David Robertson in that reunion, but it's all dependent on where the Mets are at on that given day, right here in the next week and a half, and how those teams are viewing their, I guess, previews or where they expect to be at in the second half. Like the Texas Rangers, we don't know. They could still believe in themselves. We just don't know what they're asking. But the Mets will be buyers first and foremost. To just put that on the table right now, they'll be buyers. It could be a buy sell, right? Like I said, with a contract like Starling Marte, that's also possible as well. There's so many different combinations. And even on July 19th, as we head closer and closer to the deadline, it's so impossible to say what is going on in the brain of David Stearns. But I'm sure a lot is right now because he's a very smart man. He's built this roster, right, from just a year ago into a team that is now competing in July for a playoff spot. That's all compared to last season that we could have hope for this season in a short turnaround in Stearns' first year. So trust in the process. It's a beautiful process, and we'll see what happens here in the next week and a half.
Absolutely. So that was the special edition Mets Hot Stove Trade Deadline Edition show. Now we're going to get to the actual game tonight that is actually going to be played starting the second half, game 96 of the season, with Sean Manaea. I was a little shocked by this, Chris. I thought Luis Severino was going to get the nod coming out of the All-Star break, not Sean Manaea. And it's a very interesting 1-2-3 to start this series. And this is going to lead to David Peterson and Sean Manaea pitching the Yankees series because they did that the last time they faced the Yankees with a bunch of lefties in those two games at Citi Field, now going to the Bronx. But what is your thoughts about Sean Manaea getting the nod after the All-Star break, starting game one of this series? I was shocked. I was really shocked about that.
Do you want me to give you like a real answer? Because I just told you, like, one of those lefties. I think that I've been very clear over the last 3.5 weeks that one of these lefties will be traded from the Mets. I could definitely be wrong, and I could just be overlooking this, but I don't know. I really don't know why it would be Sean Manaea. Sean Manaea, by the way, had a hell of a first half. He finished off the first half very well. He might have been the Mets' best pitcher to finish that first half, even above Luis Severino. So maybe the Mets just want to start off on a great note. Maybe this is something deeper in terms of just maneuvering the rotation and getting your best guys up front before the trade deadline hits. I don't really know. I know Quintana's also sick, so he's not going to be pitching in this series. I think he has a fever or something like that was reported. So kind of funny the way they kind of align this. Also funny that Luis Severino is taking jabs at the Yankees, basically having a playful group chat and saying that why would I be scared to face the Yankees? You guys only have 2 good hitters right now. That's kind of funny too. I think Tim Healy was the one who tweeted that out. But listen, I don't know why Sean Manaea is pitching today. We could look into it deeper. We could just take it at what face value is. The Mets need a win. And what Sean Manaea has shown us over the past maybe 3 or 4 starts that he has been out there on the mound is that right now he probably gives you the best chance of any starting pitcher on the Mets to win a ball game. Now, obviously a very like recency bias kind of take, but I don't have the energy to look further into it than what it is right now at face value, that the Mets just want to have the best pitcher over the last couple starts on the mound to start the second half.
Yeah, I kind of think it's rewarding Sean Manaea for his last 4 or 5 starts. I think, he was, like you said, he was our best pitcher over the last couple of weeks. He was better than Quintana, better than Severino, better than everybody, and he's been going deeper into ball games. So I guess, and maybe it was Hector, playing catch with him in Central Park. I don't know if you heard that, but yeah, I don't know if you guys heard, but Hector was in Central Park playing some softball, and Manaea was there just watching, and he asked them to play catch with him, and that's the end of the story. But you know what?
That's so dope. That is so
awesome.
dope. That is so dope that happened. And I guess according to Hector too, Sean Manaea was just basically staying in town for the All-Star weekend, and he was saying that he was just getting acclimated to New York City and that he loves the city. So, like I said, with all this sort of trade deadline talk, obviously Sean Manaea has gotten comfortable in the city and he's performing like he's comfortable. So it would suck to see him go. I think that I would take Sean Manaea over if I had to choose. If they were going to get rid of one of the starters, I would take Sean Manaea over your boy Jose Quintana. But nonetheless, it doesn't really matter at this point. It's good to see that Sean Manaea, one, is out there interacting with everyday fans, myself, you, and Hector, right? Such a cool experience for Hector as well. And it's good to see that Sean Manaea is actually just enjoying the city and enjoying being a New York Met, right? Because we talk about this offseason, guys that are shying away from the New York market and guys who actually want to be here. So you want players that want to be here first and foremost. So props to Sean Manaea.
Yeah, absolutely. That was really cool. But yeah, I think it's the fact that Sean Manaea is getting a start. I think that Mendoza is showing you that he trusts them coming out the gate in the second half. Again, we got 13 games to go until the trade deadline. We got 67 games left in the season. The Mets are 3 games over 500. Playing a bad Marlins team for 4. This is an opportunity here for the New York Mets to beat up on a bad team. A team that's probably waiting for the offseason by now. There's a lot of talk about Jazz Chisholm being on the trade market, Tanner Scott being on the trade market. A lot of guys on the trade market for the Marlins that are probably have their suitcases packed at a moment's notice because they can be traded at a moment's notice. So you got to take full advantage of that if you're the New York Mets. 3 out of 4, I think, is minimum. I think if you split against the Marlins, it's disappointing, even though you'll still be 3 games over 500 going into the Yankees series. But it'll be disappointing in my opinion. But Chris, when it comes to this lineup, I actually like the way it's written out tonight. I like Alvarez behind Pete Alonso. I don't know why. I know the power hasn't been there for Alvarez. He's been hovering around 300 for the majority of the year. And with Vientos and his power and the way he's been playing, I like that 4-5-6. I like 1 through 6. And when you throw in Iglesias in the mix as well, basically a starter, either second, third, wherever he needs to play, he's playing. I really like this lineup tonight. I love the Alvarez is batting 5th behind Pete Alonso. I don't know why. When I saw it, I was like, ooh, I like that. It felt like a gut feeling from Mendoza. What are your thoughts about this lineup tonight?
I don't have any problems with this lineup at all. I don't really care if Vientos hits behind Pete. I don't care if Francisco Alvarez hits behind Pete. I'm comfortable with either one of them doing it. Looking forward to guys continuing their great first halves going into the second half, like a Harrison Bader, who has shut me up and then some with the way that he hit the baseball in the first half. Great to see him in the lineup. Jeff McNeil, another guy that, right, whether he is a New York Met after the deadline or not, if the Mets really want to get to their peak sort of, I guess, performance level and where we all want them to be, Jeff McNeil is going to have to turn it around. I'm not saying that I've given up on Jeff McNeil. I'm just saying that he has made himself expendable based off of what the Mets have coming up, and also the presence of the guy who's hitting 7th tonight and Jose Iglesias serving as your potential second baseman for the second half. Listen, quite simple. This is what I'm going to say. If you have New York in front of your jersey, right, and it's not the Yankees, I'm going to root for you. Doesn't matter if you're Jeff McNeil. Doesn't matter if you're anybody else in between. As long as you are a New York Met until you are not a New York Met, I'm rooting for you. I like the lineup, like you said. And the guy that I'm watching all second half long, contract season, hopefully he makes it past the deadline, which I think he will. Be a very hard sell and a tough look if he doesn't, right, is Pete Alonso. He needs to have a better second half. Not saying his second or his first half was shitty by any means, right? It wasn't like the worst of the worst. But if the Mets also, right, like I just said with Jeff McNeil, want to get to where we all want them to be and maybe chase down a team like the Braves, Pete Alonso, it might have to start with him. Everybody else has got it going on. Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, Mark Vientos, Jose Iglesias is hitting 380 for crying out loud. Harrison Bader's hitting 275. Pete Alonso in his pitch recognition is going to have to sort of step up. And he's going to have to become one of those guys that Lindor and Brandon Nimmo are right now. And he's going to have to be that in the middle of the order. He's going to have to drive in runs, and he's going to have to make productive outs when there's runners in scoring position. We can't take the useless groundouts. We can't take the useless strikeouts and the useless pop-ups. We cannot take that any longer because you guess what? The guys right behind him, namely Mark Vientos and whoever else, maybe Starling Marte earlier in the season, have been bailing him out a couple of times here and there. I don't want to take this time to rag on Pete, although it may seem like I'm doing so right now. I know you've done so countless of times, Rob, as well. Everybody else knows in the chat our discussions about Pete Alonso. But I really do think this team will go as Pete Alonso goes in the second half, right? I think that if anybody is going to set the tone, it should be, right? It doesn't have to be because we've seen Francisco Lindor already do it. We've seen Brandon Nimmo already do it. JD Martinez already do it. But it should be Pete Alonso. That's all I'm going to say. So very curious to see how he starts off this second half and what version of Pete we are going to get if he's going to take his game up to that next level like we all have been expecting during that first half.
Yeah, and I'm very disappointed in both of us, Chris. How did we go an hour and 2 minutes without bringing up Pete Alonso, my favorite topic?
Damn it, it
must have been an all-star break. All right, so everybody in this lineup that you see in front of us right now on our screen has had a moment or more this season, right? Go down the list. Even Jeff McNeil over the last week has had some big hits, some big RBIs. You're 100% right, Chris. It's time for Pete Alonso to join the fucking party. That's just that simple, right? I don't want to hear fans saying, oh, he's been okay. He's been fine. When you're one of the best power hitters in baseball for the last couple of years, while you were and still probably are one of the face of your franchise, you're still one of the top jersey sellers on this team. The fan base still loves you, even though some are kind of turning around all of a sudden and realizing that, whoa, you look at the numbers, Pete hasn't really been good over the last 2 years. And it's been a problem. He needs to be next level Pete Alonso. You're 100% right once again, Chris, when you said, when Pete Alonso goes, this team goes. If Pete Alonso gets hot with this lineup, there's another level of this team that I don't think people realize that could be there. It could be scary how good this lineup can be if Pete Alonso gets hot. We still haven't seen Pete Alonso go on a 3-4 week stretch of just hitting line drives all over the place, gap to gap. His line drives as hard as he hits the ball, going over the fence, level swing, going the opposite field. That Pete Alonso has not been here through the first 95 games of the season. And he really didn't have much of that last year either, except early on in the season. So I see the chat talking about Pete Alonso, specifically Easy. That's my boy right now, because we've been on this same page with Pete Alonso for a while. Look, I've been on the Alonso, I wouldn't say hate, but criticism well before a lot of people it seemed like they were afraid to criticize the homegrown guy, the darling of this team. Polar bear, you can't do that. Look how nice of a guy he is. I can care less. Be a dick. Maybe you'll hit some home runs. The fact of the matter is, he needs to step up, right? I don't want to hear about the pressure of the contract, because what was the problem last year when the team was going downhill and the person we were looking to put the team on his shoulders wasn't doing the job either. So how about it's not Nimmo and Lindor and Vientos and Iglesias and Martinez? I want to see, can Pete Alonso carry a team for a week? Win us some ball games. Get some big RBIs. Stop popping balls up or grounding balls to the shortstop with runners on base. How about hitting a meaningful home run? Not a home run where we're up by 5 and you increase the lead by 2. Yay. That's a golf clap. Do what you're here to do. If you want that contract that Boris keeps on telling you you're going to get, which at this moment you're not, have a second half for the ages. You know what I want Pete Alonso to do? Eat my words. I want to have egg on my face because I don't want him to fail. Because when he fails, the Mets fail. I want him to have a crazy second half where he shuts me up. Because the biggest problem with Pete Alonso is shutting up the critics like myself. He has not done that. It seems like the only time when he's doing well is when the fan base is kissing his ass. How about when there's criticism that's facing you from a fan base who was kissing your ass these last 5 seasons, and take that as motivation and show that criticism is not going to stop you from being the Pete Alonso we all know you can be. If you can't, then what are you to this team? Because this team has came back from the dead without Pete Alonso doing much. Just remember that. So everybody who says, oh, how are we going to replace Pete Alonso if he's not here? Well, they're showing you how they can do it with other people that are doing their jobs in this entire lineup. Not saying that I want to get rid of Pete Alonso. It's not the case. It's just that there needs to be criticism from everybody at this point, from the one player that has not did his job getting his team back to life, back to 500, in a playoff spot, 3 games over. It's about time Pete Alonso does his job. You are here still because some still believe in you. A lot of fans would love it. And I know a lot of people in the chat would love to come back on me 3 weeks from now when Pete Alonso his 9 home runs and 12 or 20 RBIs in a 3-week stretch and shuts me up. Because that's what I want him to do. Shut me up. Because if he doesn't, I'm going to get louder. And there's going to be more criticism. I know it's hard to find more criticism for Pete Alonso from me. But it needs to be said. And it needs to be talked about more. And the media, sorry, Chris, I know I went on a big rant here. But the media has got to stop kissing Pete Alonso's ass. Because it's annoying how much they've been kissing his ass. Did you watch the home run derby? They were up his ass. That's how much they were kissing his ass. They gotta stop because he doesn't deserve it right now. Sorry, Chris.
No, you're good. I don't really pay attention to what the media says about Pete Alonso as maybe much as you do, but all I pay attention to is when there's runners on second and third base with less than 2 outs. Is he able to get the job done like he has done in seasons prior? There's been numerous times this season where I think he takes really bad at bats, especially when he needs to drive a ball. And we're not asking for a bases clearing double. Well, that would be nice, right? We would be asking for that, but all we're asking is be productive and with runners in scoring position, and that could mean just giving us a sac fly. Please, you're one of the best power hitters, like Rob just said. You should be able to get the ball deep enough to get a sac fly and an RBI. Quite simple. Guys like Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo, right? Those 2 guys that are also part of this core had abysmal starts to their season. Averages sometimes even below 220, below 210. OPSs that were, I don't even know. They were on the other half of 600, right? They both have gotten their OPS number, which I like to evaluate, right? Not getting into the nitty-gritty statistics and all this sort of advanced metrics, but OPS is a nice little statistic to look at in terms of your offensive efficiency, especially when you have situations where you need to drive either balls over the fence or in the gaps. And Guess what? Francisco Lindor's and Brandon Nimmo's OPSs have been better and have climbed above Pete Alonso's, right? When Pete Alonso at one point was above them because they got off to such bad starts. Pete Alonso needs to turn it around. I need to see him start hitting the balls in gaps. I don't care which gap. You can go pull side, like Carson from Mets Weekly loves, or you can go to the opposite side, like Rob and myself love. I like all the gaps here on the baseball field as long as it's finding green in the outfield.
Yes.
But you get what I'm getting at. The production, especially in those situations where you need to drive a baseball, whether it's in somebody's glove for the sac fly or in the gap and you're standing on second base doing your little celebration, I don't care. Just get it done. And that's what Pete Alonso hasn't been doing enough to my liking so far this season. And I think that's where I will end the Pete Alonso discussion, because guess what? That's quite as simple as, like, if you're hitting 3 or 4 in this Mets lineup with where they're at right now, that's the bare minimum of what we should be expecting. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. So screw what the media says. That's my take. Screw what the media says. I don't care. Kiss Pete's ass. I don't care. Whatever you do, Pete Alonso, you shouldn't care what they say about you either. Go out there and hit a damn baseball. That's it. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? We're starting today fresh, right? I'm not watching this game and wanting anybody in this lineup to fail. That's not a fan, right? I'm not trying to do that. I'm hoping and praying and crossing my toes and fingers Pete Alonso getting a big hit tonight, because that's helping the Mets. That's it. So we're over an hour into this pregame. It was a lot to talk about because the All-Star break, we really haven't been together on shows over the last week or so. So there was a lot to talk about back and forth, but we're back. We're ready to go. We're ready for Mets baseball. 67 games to go in the season, 13 games until the trade deadline. This next 10 days or so, 8-10 days, is going to really tell where this team is going to be at for David Stearns to pull the trigger on a couple of bullpen arms, or the Mets fall apart and they just be sellers. There's still options on the table, as we all know, with this roster, the way it's been set up by David Stearns. A lot of options. Hopefully, we're on the buyer side because it's more fun that we don't have to talk about nonsense over the next 2.5 months of the season. But, Chris, any final thoughts before we close out this stream and watch some Mets baseball in a half hour?
A couple of final thoughts here. Put up a fun little poll in the live chat of my stream. If you haven't checked that out, obviously it's ended now, but I got a nice little 31 votes in there asking you all who is going to be the first Met in this second half to put a ball over the fence. And surprisingly, right, I think I would have to have voted for Pete Alonso if I did get a vote on my own poll. But, right, and just to round it all out, the Pete Alonso talk, right, I would have given him the benefit of the doubt because I think he does like to hit in that Marlins park. But the results were Mark Vientos is the first one to hit a home run in the second half. So we'll see if that materializes and if that's correct. Second of all, into the actual, I guess, outlook of today's pitching matchup, these two guys really haven't had that much sample size to go against their respective teams. So Sean Manaea, a lot of the guys in the Marlins starting lineup haven't seen Sean Manaea all too often. I think Brian De La Cruz has had some success. He's 2 for 6 in his career off of Sean Manaea. And on the flip side, the Mets really haven't had too much success versus Edward Cabrera, who's on the mound for the Marlins tonight as well. I think Nimmo is hitting the best out of anybody that has more than like 5 or 6 at bats against him. But we'll see what happens. Like everyone said in the chat just a couple minutes ago, we know that the Mets schedule still isn't strong, but teams like the Marlins in division games like this, they still pose, I guess, risks, right, for losses. This is still the MLB at the end of the day. The Marlins aren't a great team, but they always play the Mets tough. You can't sit there and just expect to win and expect to be content with what you did to end the first half. You can't end that urgency, because the way that I saw the Mets end that second half and that run that they went on, they played with more of a sense of urgency and more of a sense of camaraderie, vibes, OMG sign, Luis Severino carrying the OMG sign, etc. So I don't want to see a lack of energy tonight. I want to see the Mets come out, play sound baseball, and come out with energy. And it's very evident, even through your TV screen, hundreds of miles away, watching these guys, if they're playing with high energy versus not. So that's what I want to end this stream with. So other than that, appreciate everybody watching. Hit that thumbs up. Post game with myself and Nick from the He Did This to Me podcast is going down tonight. Rob, I know you can't join that. But we'll be doing a post game tonight, regardless if it's win or loss. We'll be recapping the game, talking about some highlights, and all that other stuff in between, talking about our notes, etc. Come chop it up with us in the live chat. The stream is already up, so if you want to go ahead and just navigate to that, or just turn the notifications on as well. And we'll see you all tonight. Let's hope for a Mets win. And as always, LGM.
Absolutely, and make sure you checked out the post game tonight with Chris and Nick. Win or lose, they're going to be there talking about the game. So, guys, listen, they got to keep the good times rolling. They can't come out flat. They played too well over this last 6-7 weeks to get back into this hunt. Don't mess it up now. Keep the good vibes going. Keep the momentum going. And let's have another 10-game stretch, 7-3, 8-2. Let's have one of those stretches where there's no doubt that the Mets are going to be buyers at the deadline. And we're really going to be talking about a team that could be really fighting for a number one wild card spot because the Braves are coming to town. And if we're right around where we need to be, as of right now, we're 4 games. But if we're 4 games or closer by the time we face them, that series is going to be epic. But it starts tonight with Sean Manaea on the mound. Thank you guys for watching the Amazing Mets Pregame Show. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to both channels, and make sure you tune into Chris and Nick for the post game tonight.
One more thing here.
Get
everybody. I'm not sure if you all do so already. In the chat, my guy Pure Adrenaline Sports in the chat. Make sure you go subscribe to Pure Adrenaline Sports. I will definitely message you offline as well. In-game lives over there as well. Great stuff.
Yes,
that's my guy. Does great stuff. Make sure you subscribe. I just had to throw that out there, so I apologize.
Absolutely. And yes, a lot of channels redirect to certain channels. That's always a great way to help out other channels that you're cool with or just trying to help in general, right? We got a big base here that we're trying to expand out to all the content creators for the Mets because it's important, because we do a lot of hard work here. It's not easy and it takes a lot of time out of the day. But once again, guys, we always appreciate it. Another Mets pregame in the books. We'll see Chris and Nick later tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. Let's go Mets. Enjoy the game. Happy second half, baseball fans. Let's have fun, guys. Have a great night. Let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.